How's it going, guys? It's your boy Kanji FPL and welcome back to the channel. On today's video, we're going to be looking at which are the best squad structures to use whenever we're building our game week 1 squads. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. There are three main FPL squad structures that FPL managers are buying into, maybe without realizing that they're choosing to join. And I think we can just discuss them immediately. The first is going to be Salah plus Haaland, followed by a slightly less popular version in only Salah, and then the least popular version in only Haaland. Of course, there is the idea to have neither Salah nor Haaland and have a very well-balanced squad, but I just think captaincy is more at risk in that structure, and I think most people won't fall into this category. So let's focus firstly on Salah plus Haaland. The pros are that you have the optimal captaincy rotation from game week 1 to 5, and you won't need to worry too much about captaincy points because you'll always have the best option in each week. The issue is that you lack the squad depth in general. There isn't enough price point flexibility. You'll find yourself always buying into a 6.0 defender, and you won't have any money in the bank in case you pick the wrong one. The same thing would have to go with a midfielder if you pick a 6.5, where let's say your differential 6.5 midfielder like Nkunku doesn't get enough minutes and blanks in game week 1 and game week 2, well, he could be getting a price drop, and someone else that killed it, like maybe Morgan Gibbs-White or Leon Bailey, can be going up, and then you're handcuffed and you're stuck to Nkunku because you have no money in the bank, and in order to get money, you'd have to sell Salah or Haaland, but you likely wouldn't want to do that early on. So I think it handcuffs you for the first 6 weeks, but that's the downside. The upside is that you have the highest floor because of having a safe captaincy rotation, and you're able to take the risk in your differential 6.5 area rather than risking it with your captaincy, which could be a very good positive or a very bad negative. So that's why I think you'll find a lot of managers in this structure. This structure also has a very low risk of wildcarding early. Because you have the main points players of Salah plus Haaland, you'll be able to just stay patient for the first 4 or 5 weeks, wait till Liverpool's fixtures turn, and then you'll be able to spend the Salah money on any midfielder and upgrade any position without the squad. But up until you're able to spend the Salah money, you're kind of handcuffs. So this type of structure has pros and cons, but I understand why it's the most popular structure so far. The second most popular structure is going to be an only Salah structure, where you're allowed to have more balance and you can have more creativity and more flexibility. So you're able to put your money in defense if that's where you think the points are. You can get to Van Dijk as well as Trent and then move those spots on to players like Saliba, Gabriel, Vardiol, or even Pedro Porro later on. You can also spend your money in the midfield. You could start with Son and Saka. You could start with Foden and Palmer. So I think it allows you to spend the money in the positions that you want to. And that's why I think this is the second most popular draft. Now, just because you can spend the money where you want, it can be fun, but that doesn't mean it's safe. I think it really just comes down to where you think you can find the value and where you think the points are going to come from. And that's why I think managers are favoring this style of draft. The issue is that when we think about captaincy from game week 1 to 6, you're not going to be completely optimal. In game week 2, when Haaland is going to be playing at home to Ipswich, he will absolutely destroy them. I would expect at least 2 goals. And in that week, if you don't own Haaland, he's going to punish you. So the question to ask yourself is, does the damage that Haaland can do in game week 2 outweigh the gains that you can have from having a balanced squad from game week 1 to 6? And that's something that I think you have to reflect on and decide for yourself. The issue with starting without Haaland is that if he gets a goal or a brace against Chelsea, that would tempt a lot of managers to bring Haaland in for game week 2. And I think you are basically minimizing your points in this squad structure if you move to Haaland in game week 2. I think you either have to start with him or ignore him up until game week 7. So I think if you start without him, a lot of managers are going to risk using an early wildcard just to bring him in, whether in game week 2 or in game week 4 or 5 if he continues to haul weekly. Another issue of this structure is that when it comes time to game week 7 and we see Man City's fixtures, they look absolutely gorgeous. The issue is that sometimes when you go with an only Salah draft, you've spread your money so thinly across so many places in your squad that it's hard to find enough money to bring Haaland back in. One thing to focus on when you're building this style of draft is, how can I get Haaland into my team in game week 7 while not using too many transfers? I think the best idea in this structure is to build a very strong core of players that you like to own over the first 10 to 15 weeks, and then spend your transfers on the premiums like a Trent, like a Salah, and then eventually bring Haaland in. So think focus on building a very strong core from game week 1 and then focus your transfers on the premiums. I think that's the best way to maximize points in an only Salah structure. Moving on to the third and least popular structure, it's going to be only Haaland. Now, I think this will be a differential strategy. I think this won't be addressing a large mass of the FPL population. So I'm sure a lot of people would have already clicked out of this video by this time. However, it's just nice to think about why people would be in this structure. I think if they are, it's going to be one of two reasons. One, you think that Salah has early started to regress, and regardless of the good fixtures, there's potential uncertainty over his minutes, maybe even potentially a down spell for Liverpool, moving away from one of the best managers of all time in Jurgen Klopp, moving on to Arne Slot. There could be a down spell in terms of the output from Liverpool players overall, so maybe you just want to avoid them. So I understand that logic. The second reason they could be in the structure is because they look at the potential captaincy points from game week 1 to 5, and they're looking at the alternatives in game week 2 for Haaland, and they're seeing that there's a large difference between Haaland and the second best alternative relative to Salah and the second best alternatives in the other opening game weeks. And I actually fall into the same logic. So I've spent a lot of time in this structure, so I can tell you wholeheartedly what I think are the pros and cons of this strategy. The issue is that you will likely start slow because I'm expecting Liverpool to just get the points. I mean, when you have Trent, Salah, Van Dijk, Alisson in the squad, I'm sure you'll pick up wins in the Premier League, regardless of who the manager is. So there's a risk of starting slow. You also have to hold your nerve to make sure that you don't spend transfers to bring Salah in because you won't want to be holding him longer term anyway. However, you'll be in a good position because you have Haaland already. You'll be able to captain him as a differential. I mean, who would have thought you would have been able to do that last year? So you're put in a very strong position. In addition, you wouldn't have spread the money too thinly because you already have Haaland in your squad. So you're able to bring in the differentials at the right price points that you want because you're already in the structure you want to be in long term. So I really like that. Another positive of the structure is that you actually are at a low risk of using an early wildcard because you already have Haaland in your team. If Salah punishes you and gets points consistently for a couple weeks, you just have to take the pain. Let him get the points, just wait, and everyone will eventually move to Haaland in game week 7 anyway. So I think you'll be in a very good position. The only way this would hurt you is if Haaland blanks multiple times and people were able to have a better overall squad from 1 to 6 that outweighed the points that you got from Haaland in game week 2. But overall, I really like this strategy, and I think in order to maximize points in this structure, you have to spend transfers on your core players to make sure that you have the best captaincy alternatives in game week 1 and in game week 5, where I think you wouldn't want to be captaining Haaland. At least I wouldn't when he's playing against Chelsea and against Arsenal, even if they're at home. Specifically diving into those captaincies in game week 1, I think it's important that you have Bukayo Saka if he's fit, or Alexander Isak to be captaining them in game week 1. And then in game week 5, I think it's really tough because Arsenal play against Man City, Liverpool play against Bournemouth, so of course you'd want to captain Mo, but you don't have him. So you could potentially have a rage transfer of Haaland to Salah, but I think most people in the structure wouldn't do it. And I think the other alternative to consider would be somebody like Palmer or Son in the structure. So if you own one of them, then I think you'd be captaining them. So I think you'll have to have the right premium mid at the 10.0 price point that gets the points in game week 5. And then I think you'll be able to thrive in this structure completely. So just focus on the game week 1 and game week 5 captaincy options. Dive deep into it, make sure that you have the right option, and I really like this squad structure myself. Moving on to the overall summary view, I think there are pros and cons to all of the squad structures that you could choose, and I think it's really just up to you. Do you think you can find value in the 6.5 midfielders? Personally, I don't think I can. I have more questions than I have answers in that price point. For example, look at Chelsea. I think Nkunku is the best player, but Mudryk could play on the left. Madueke could play on the right. Dewsbury Hall could play in the cam position. There's so many different players in that squad, so I'm not sure how many minutes somebody like Nkunku will get because which position does he even play? I mean, Jackson should be the number 9 that's nailed, right? So if he's potentially playing in the 9 position in preseason, that would change my whole mindset, I think. So if we see there are two 6.5s that become very obvious and apparent to go for, I think I'll find myself in the Salah plus Haaland structure. But for now, I think I'm swaying away from that because I have more question marks in that price point specifically, and I have much more confidence in the 7.0s, the 8.5s, and the 10.0 midfielders than I have in the 6.5 specifically, and that's what's swinging me more so towards the only Salah and only Haaland draft. On top of that, whenever I'm looking and comparing my only Salah and only Haaland versus the Salah plus Haaland drafts, I think you can absolutely destroy Salah plus Haaland when you include somebody like Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think Trent is the perfect differential in the first opening 6 weeks. I think Liverpool have the best opening fixtures. Trent has world-class creativity as well as having access to the clean sheet. So I think he's the perfect differential to hurt the Salah plus Haaland structure players. So I think that's the player that I really want to fit in. And once I do that and I'm trying to fit that in with Haaland, you really find yourself in a structure where you're looking for a 5.5 midfielder. And I think that's the issue with that style for me, is I have so much confidence in the 8.5s, 7.0s that I think including a Trent in that structure as well really puts me in the 5.5 price point for midfield with Haaland. And that's why I'm kind of swayed away from that as well. I don't really have confidence in that. Now, there are options that can show themselves. Like somebody like Dwight McNeil could be a great option at Everton. Somebody like Emile Smith-Rowe going to Arsenal could be a great option at 5.5. But how much faith do I have in those players? Not that much. So I think that's why I'm really moving towards the only Salah draft and just trying to focus my energy and my time figuring out the right core midfielders to be owning for the first 10 to 15 weeks, and then spending my transfers on the premium players like Salah and moving it on to Haaland. So I'm currently in the only Salah camp myself, but that doesn't mean that's the best camp to be in. It's really about what you think is best and where you think you can find value. So if I provided some value to you over the course of this video, please just drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all again soon. Peace.